Behind the success of great icons of industrialization, such as Carnegie, Rockefeller, and Morgan, behind those who built their fortunes, crushed under the weight of work, paid nearly nothing for risking their lives, lay the American people. The innovation of the age came at too steep a price. The men at the top lived off the blood, sweat, and tears of the masses. These men at the top controlled the market with monopolies and vertical consolidation, making the market anti-competitive and taking the power away from the workers to themselves. These practices were new ideas, and brought forth to fix our problems the gospel of wealth and the social gospel, teachings on how to deal with the poor that plagued the country. Either we could make all of our money in whatever way, and then give it back, or we could give it all away as we make it. But the biggest question, what was the role of government in all of this? With new ideas came also new practices. Women, no longer able to stay at home, had to work in factories, taking clerical jobs as typists, switchboard operators, or saleswomen. Along with the new jobs and positions in society, women began to speak out and induce change. Though women of the age reached great new heights, they were still limited greatly and wanted more. They could now voice and act on these opinions, and did. Many and more of these workers were flowing into Ellis Island from the rest of the world every day. Fleeing everything from religious persecution to famines and poverty, they came to America looking for a better life. In the first half of the 19th century, people immigrated from northwestern Europe. These immigrants were not received well at first, but soon integrated into American society. Then, in the second half of the 19th century, new immigrants came from southern and western Europe, flooding the workforce and facing heavy discrimination. What these immigrants found were not streets of gold, rather streets slick with grime and crammed tenements accompanied by low wages and terrible working conditions, making people wonder if the trip was really worth it. On the other end of the United States, Angel Island had been admitting Chinese immigrants, the numbers of which were stemmed significantly in 1882 by the Chinese exclusion laws, banning Chinese labor in order to protect localities. Even with the Statue of Liberty as a symbol, anti-immigration thought was generally provoked out of fear for job loss. The social classes during the Gilded Age were separating at an astonishing speed. Between the rich thriving and the poor suffering was not an age of equality. For the rich, with running water and electricity, life was good, but for the lower classes, made up mostly of immigrants, crammed into tiny tenements with no running water, no electricity, and barely any furniture, life was not so good. The harsh life they were living led to workers' strikes, some of the most memorable being the Pullman strike in 1894 and the Great Railroad Strike in 1877. These strikes made people think about the terrible working conditions and salaries these workers faced under the power. The South was a changing landscape, with separation laws keeping blacks and whites apart in separate and certainly not equal water fountains, bathrooms, benches, schools, restaurants, and more. With the rigid social structure of white America, there was an increasing support for the separation and degrading of blacks, with Jim Crow laws and hyper-racist minstrel shows demeaning blacks. Blacks themselves were very separated on their own separation. Some believed that they could be separated, but it was up to them to make it equal through education. Others, though, wanted no part of separation and fought for equality. But with no sides able to agree, no progress was made. In the West, civilization came along the railroads, pulling with it technology and new ideas. The United States surveyed the land, then gave it out according to the Homestead Act, 160 acres to almost any man. By giving away Indian inhabited land, it pushed out the Indians who had lived there all their lives. This forcible relocation of Indians was a source of many conflicts between the United States and the Indians, including Black Hills, Wounded Knee, and many more. The Indians were to be replaced by bonanza farms,
giant irrigated farms specializing in the exportation of cash crops. The Indians who were being pushed out of their homes were sent to assimilation schools designed to change the Indians from being wild and savage and teach them how to read and write and speak English, to push them into modern society.
On another note, during the Gilded Age, competition between the Democrats and Republicans was evident, both parties using bribery and generously using the spoil system, giving jobs to supporters of the party who might not have been qualified. In response to this, a federal law was passed stating that some government jobs had to be based on merit. Still, though, many jobs were given away to the unqualified while corruption ran through the government, infecting the country. The politicians at the time looked only to benefit themselves, putting in place legislation to further their own personal goals. Many had established close relationships with companies in which they held stock, making decisions to help those companies rather than the people. Even the party system was corrupted by special interest groups. People would switch from party to party if anything seemed to be going badly. In addition, the government was taking out of circulation money that had been collected through tariffs, hurting economic growth.